The Celestial Omnibus by E. M. Forster. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Celestial Omnibus 1. The boy who resided at Agathox Lodge 28, Buckingham Park Road, Surbiton, had often been puzzled by the old signpost that stood almost opposite. He asked his mother about it, and she replied that it was a joke, and not a very nice one, which had been made many years back by some naughty young men, and that the police ought to remove it. For there were two strange things about this signpost. Firstly, it pointed up a blank alley, and secondly, it had painted on it, in faded characters, the words, "To Heaven." What kind of young men were they? He asked. I think your father told me that one of them wrote verses, and was expelled from the university and came to grief in other ways. Still, it was a long time ago. You must ask your father about it. He will say the same as I do, that it was put up as a joke. So it doesn't mean anything at all. She sent him upstairs to put on his best things, for the Bonses were coming to tea, and he was to hand the cake stand. It struck him, as he wrenched on his tightening trousers, that he might do worse than ask Mr. Bonds about the signpost. His father, though very kind, always laughed at him, shrieked with laughter, whenever he or any other child asked a question or spoke. But Mr. Bonds was serious as well as kind. He had a beautiful house in Little Books. He was a churchwarden and a candidate for the county council. He had donated to the free library enormously. He presided over the literary society, and had members of Parliament to stop with him. In short, he was probably the wisest person alive. Yet even Mr. Bonds could only say that the signpost was a joke, the joke of a person named Shelley. "Of course," cried the mother. "I told you so, dear. That was the name." "Had you never heard of Shelley?" asked Mr. Bonds. "No," said the boy, and hung his head. "But is there no Shelley in the house?" "Why, yes," exclaimed the lady, in much agitation. "Dear Mr. Bonds, we aren't such Philistines as that. Two at the least, one a wedding present and the other, smaller print, in one of the spare rooms." "I believe we have 7 Shelleys," said Mr. Bonds, with a slow smile. Then he brushed the cake crumbs off his stomach, and, together with his daughter, rose to go. The boy, obeying a wink from his mother, saw them all the way to the garden gate, and when they had gone he did not at once return to the house, but gazed for a little up and down Buckingham Park Road. His parents lived at the right end of it. After number 39, the quality of the houses dropped very suddenly, and 64 had not even a separate servants' entrance. But at the present moment the whole road looked rather pretty, for the sun had just set in splendour, and the inequalities of rent were drowned in a saffron afterglow. Small birds twittered, and the breadwinner's train shrieked musically down through the cutting, that wonderful cutting which has drawn to itself the whole beauty out of Surbiton, and clad itself, like any alpine valley, with the glory of the fir and the silver birch and the primrose. It was this cutting that had first stirred desires within the boy, desires for something just a little different, he knew not what. Desires that would return whenever things were sunlit, as they were this evening, running up and down inside him, up and down, till he would feel quite unusual all over, and as likely as not would want to cry. This evening he was even sillier, for he slipped across the road towards the signpost and began to run up the blank alley. The alley runs between high walls, the walls of the gardens of Ivanhoe and Belle Vista, respectively. It smells a little all the way, and is scarcely 20 yards long, including the turn at the end. So not unnaturally the boy soon came to a standstill. "I'd like to kick that Shelley," he exclaimed, and glanced idly at a piece of paper which was pasted on the wall. Rather an odd piece of paper, and he read it carefully before he turned back. This is what he read: S and CRCC, alteration in service. Owing to lack of patronage, the company are regretfully compelled to suspend the hourly service and to retain only the sunrise and sunset omnibuses, which will run as usual. It is to be hoped that the public will patronize an arrangement which is intended for their convenience. As an extra inducement, the company will, for the first time, now issue return tickets, available one day only, which may be obtained of the driver. Passengers are again reminded that no tickets are issued at the other end, and that no complaints in this connection will receive consideration from the company. Nor will the company be responsible for any negligence or stupidity on the part of passengers, nor for hailstorms, lightning, loss of tickets, nor for any act of God. For the direction. Now he had never seen this notice before, nor could he imagine where the omnibus went to. S, of course, was for Surbiton, and RCC meant Road Car Company. But what was the meaning of the other C? Coombe and Malden, perhaps, or possibly City. Yet it could not hope to compete with the Southwestern. The whole thing, the boy reflected, was run on hopelessly unbusinesslike lines. Why no tickets from the other end? And what an hour to start! Then he realized that unless the notice was a hoax, an omnibus must have been starting just as he was wishing the Bonzes good-bye. He peered at the ground through the gathering dusk, and there he saw what might or might not be the marks of wheels. Yet nothing had come out of the alley, and he had never seen an omnibus at any time in the Buckingham Park Road. No, it must be a hoax. Like the signposts, like the fairy tales, like the dreams upon which he would wake suddenly in the night. And with a sigh he stepped from the alley, right into the arms of his father. Oh, how his father laughed! "Poor, poor Popsy!" he cried. "Diddums, Diddums! Diddums think he'd walkie-palkie up to Evink!" And his mother, too, also convulsed with laughter, appeared on the steps of Agathox Lodge. "Don't, Bob!" she gasped. "Don't be so naughty! Oh, you'll kill me! Oh, leave the boy alone!" But all that evening the joke was kept up. The father implored to be taken too. Was it a very tiring walk? Need one wipe one's shoes on the doormat? And the boy went to bed, feeling faint and sore, and thankful for only one thing, that he had not said a word about the omnibus. It was a hoax, yet through his dreams it grew more and more real, and the streets of Surbiton, through which he saw it driving, seemed instead to become hoaxes and shadows. And very early in the morning he woke with a cry, for he had had a glimpse of its destination. He struck a match, and its light fell not only on his watch, but also on his calendar, so that he knew it to be half an hour to sunrise. It was pitch dark, for the fog had come down from London in the night, and all Surbiton was wrapped in its embraces. Yet he sprang out and dressed himself, for he was determined to settle, once for all, which was real, the omnibus or the streets. I shall be a fool one way or the other, he thought, until I know. Soon he was shivering in the road under the gas lamp that guarded the entrance to the alley. To enter the alley itself required some courage. Not only was it horribly dark, but he now realized that it was an impossible terminus for an omnibus. If it had not been for a policeman, whom he heard approaching through the fog, he would never have made the attempt. The next moment he had made the attempt and failed. Nothing. Nothing but a blank alley and a very silly boy gaping at its dirty floor. It was a hoax. "I'll tell Papa and Mamma," he decided. "I deserve it. I deserve that they should know. I'm too silly to be alive." And he went back to the gate of Agathox Lodge. There he remembered that his watch was fast. The sun was not risen. It would not rise for 2 minutes. Give the bus every chance, he thought cynically, and returned into the alley. But the omnibus was there. 2. It had 2 horses, whose sides were still smoking from their journey, and its 2 great lamps shone through the fog against the alley's walls, changing their cobwebs and moss into tissues of fairyland. The driver was huddled up in a cape. He faced a blank wall, and how he had managed to drive